The Valley Baptist Legacy Foundation, they basically are separate from just Valley Baptist Church, and
Valley Baptist Hospital.
Or Valley Baptist Hospital, right? The foundation is a separate thing, and most of their money is devoted towards benefiting the health of RGV residents. And so my understanding, based on my conversation with Felipe Salinas, is that Kelly Cronin and him and perhaps others met with the foundation, and they talked about all the stuff that was going on with UTRGV. And the foundation said, okay, out of all of those, what is Dr. Bailey's priority? And they said clinical psychology. And then about 2 days later, I met with Felipe Salinas, and 2 days after that, we submitted a letter of intent. So everything was really, really quick. And then by the following week, we found out that they wanted us to submit a full proposal, which was due in about 60 days after that.
First of all, like a lot of private foundations or even some of the federal granting agencies, in order to submit a proposal, you have to be invited. And so some of them, what they do is they have you submit something briefer, like a letter of introduction or a pre-proposal. They ask you what you want to do, what the project is about. And then with Valley Baptist Legacy Foundation, what they do is they look at the pre-proposal, which I think is about a page or?
No, it ended up being a little bit more detailed than I thought, okay. About 4.5 pages.
All right, so 4.5 pages. They look at the pre-proposal, and then they decide whether they want to extend you an invitation to submit the full proposal. Private foundations all have their own systems, and some of them might be very formal, like a rubric. Mm-hmm. Some of them might be, like a couple people in a room just reading and picking what they want. Definitely federal granting agencies have a rubric, but do you want to talk about what they want?
Yeah, basically like a project abstract, just a summary of what you'll be doing. They wanted a fair amount of detail for a letter of intent regarding the background of the problem at hand. What they were really interested in more so than that is just a timeline. Like because they asked for a 5-year grant, that was the information sent to us. So they wanted to know how exactly over the course of 5 years we would do this. And then a roundabout budget figure and the sort of, in general, the sort of things we spend the money on if we got it. So it's a little bit, I thought it was just going to be a page kind of, that represents an abstract, but there's more than that. There's a fair amount of detail in regards to what we're going to be doing over the course of time. Mm. And that's how we spend. And plus there's information about just the background of UTRGV and what this merger is about, and just kind of provide that in the background as well. The full proposal wanted the budget in detail, like every single dollar, how it was going to be spent at what point in time. But also they wanted us to define outcomes. Like, how do we decide that we're doing what we're supposed to do in regards to whether we're being successful or not? And also in the full proposal, we had to kind of be very specific in regards to what the overall outcome of the grant would be, which is namely a Ph.D. program, and how we were going to be at the stage where we're ready to become accredited.
Yeah, I think they wanted more information about the impact on the area. Mm-hmm. We had to give more, and also, like Joe was saying, like what we call in psychology, they wanted more of an operationalization of our outcomes, how we would be measuring them, what specifically would we be looking at, and how we would be measuring it and tracking to make sure we were achieving what we're supposed to achieve.
Yeah, in the full proposal too, we provided a bigger argument for why there is the need for increased mental health services. Mm-hmm. And so we provide a lot of data about how there's just not enough here.
I think a lot of people think about when you start thinking about like how to get a grant, they think that starts when you start the application. But really, I think what makes you competitive for a lot of grants is the experiences that you've had in the years before you get the grant. And so a lot of times when somebody's reviewing a grant, either a private foundation or definitely at the federal level like NIH or NSF, they're not just reviewing the project that you're proposing, but they're reviewing your background and the person who's proposing it, and whether it looks like this person would have the capabilities or the abilities to, or the background to implement that project. So they evaluate not just you, or not just the project, but they're evaluating your ability to implement the project, and also the greater context that you're in. So like they evaluate the institution. Whether you're writing for NIH, NSF, or a local foundation, and you can tell me whether you're going or not. I think what's key to your writing is that you're clear and you're telling a story. I think that when people are struggling in terms of writing a grant, it's that they're not taking the perspective of the reader to know what are they going to want to know, and what am I really trying to do, and how can I tell a story of why this is what I think we should be doing. And I think sometimes it really goes back to the basics that you learn from a very young age. You have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I think sometimes people try to skip to the end, like this is the project, without. That's what I notice when I'm having problems reading other people's writing, is I don't understand the logic behind it. And that's really just telling a story.
Yeah, I had to keep reminding myself that the people who are going to read this and make a decision on this were the foundation's board members, who weren't probably that familiar with the world of clinical psychology. Or, when I wrote about outcomes, for example, how are we going to know whether or not we're doing what we're supposed to? It wasn't like in this technical statistical jargon. It was stuff that was pretty straightforward and scientific driven, but understandable by, smart people who aren't necessarily psychologists.
I always try to look at the successful applications, and at least for federal grants, you can look in databases and see what's been funded, and you can ask those people. And I did do this, and I contacted the people who had been successful in submitting those grants and asked them for a copy of their grant. You have to kind of back things up from the deadline. I think a lot of times, and people like to work up until the deadline, and I think that might be okay once you have a lot of experience, but when you don't, I think you want to get things done well ahead of time, and then send it to people, colleagues, who will give you a real critical review. So if you're going to do a research grant, I think you have to realize that there's a good chance you're not going to get it, and there's an even better chance you're not going to get it the first time around. But if you get feedback, you get, at least at NIH, you get two revisions. And you can use that and pay attention to it and use it. But there's a 100% chance you're not going to get it if you don't submit.
In regards to the Valley Baptist grant, and in regards to another grant I got from an institution called the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. It was for some farm work research I was doing. They kind of knew who I was, based on my research. And in both of these grants, although I had to do paperwork and apply for them and so forth, they kind of approached me and said, I think this would be good for you, right? And so I know, in order to reach tenure and promotion and stuff, it's like the chicken and egg thing. You need to apply for grants and hopefully get grants. But at the same time, once you become well known for what you're doing, that becomes easier.
But it doesn't always have to be an either or. You could write a paper that then helps you write the grant.
Or sometimes you need to collect pilot data before you write the grant, so that data itself can turn into a database that you can publish from. So there could be, even if it doesn't get funded, some direct benefits to your research.
Like part of becoming a research emergent university is there's a lot of changes that need to take place, and one of them is the way we look at students. And I think right now we look at students as people who come here and take classes and go home. But in graduate school, it's more of a junior colleague model, and they're part of a team that works together. And their graduate students are important parts of a research institution. And so we have to kind of change the way we think about the graduate students, because they're not people who come and take a class and go.
The timing of the grant was great, because we've been here, this is our third year. The first couple of years we spent working on a Ph.D. proposal, for clinical psychology that would be approved hopefully by the state. We just submitted that this past summer. So the reason why this grant came into being at this point in time is because some of the stuff that I think is lacking in regards to our PhD proposal, this grant helps offset. Things like space, monies for, if we do recruit students, for stipends and tuition waivers, equipment, monies to recruit more faculty, and so forth. And so lurking in the background of this grant is the idea that we're trying to get a PhD program off the ground. So the $6 million is really to make that happen.